What's up, San Diego? Good morning to all of you out there. I know it's a big holiday party weekend, so hopefully not a lot of you are waking up on the wrong side of a truck bed. This morning, I was going out on Friday, met with somebody for some drinks and everything, and we had to go to like 3 different places because they were all rented out for holiday parties, which I immediately took accountability for. It was like, this is probably a thing. I should have known better than to potentially pick the certain places that we did pick just to get shut out twice. Third time was the charm, though, so it worked out. But this will be our last show of the calendar year as we will get to the new year and a lot of different new news, hopefully with the Padres and what's that phrase? Like spring brings, eternal, I don't know, something like that. Something where the spring does something. I don't remember. But hopefully some good news in 2025. Hopefully all of you had a great 2024. You know what? I do want to start the show by thanking all of you for joining us every Sunday morning. I know we had a handful of days off when I was out with other events going on or some other things that I had to do throughout the year. But when I was asked to do this show last January, I thought it was kind of a cool opportunity to be able to talk with you guys, be able to talk Padres baseball on a Sunday leading into Padres baseball, kind of the pregame show, which is kind of fun. I also thought during the football season it'd be good to kind of recap college and then dive into the National Football League on a Sunday morning, which we've been able to do, and kind of give that local perspective on some of the national storylines. And it's been fun. It's been a great time being able to talk with you guys each and every Sunday morning. Like to continue that again today. Again, last show of the new year. We'll be continuing next year. There's some new programming that's going to be coming in to 97.3 The Fan on the weekends. So we will be maybe at a different time slot. Still a lot of info that still needs to be knocked out, but that will be coming up over on the weekends in the new year. So we might be just an hour later than we usually are, which I'm totally okay with. Because when I signed up for this, it was like, oh, yeah, 8 o'clock. That's not too bad. And then I remembered what time I'd have to wake up to be here on time and be prepared for a show. And Sunday mornings got here a lot faster than I thought for a lot of different times, whether it be wedding events that I had to go to over the summer, with Saturdays leading into Sunday mornings, or, just in the football season of coaching high school football and having all day Friday with 2 games and then film on Saturday mornings and then, going to do USD stuff. I mean, those Sunday mornings hit very hard. I mean, it's been fun though. So what I'd like to do is we'll talk, Padres had the winter meetings this week, Major League Baseball had winter meetings this week. I'd like to talk a little bit about that. I mean, there wasn't too much that involved the Padres, per se. But we did get a lot of info out of the Padres about what this lineup could potentially look like, what they're possibly trying to do, during the offseason. And I thought Annie Halbrin laid out perfectly kind of the situation of what the Padres are facing. And I think it definitely needs to be reiterated. And if I have time, I can go back and kind of cut what she said from the show yesterday. Might have even been 2 days ago, but I think it was yesterday, about the process and what goes into the Padres essentially spending money. And we're going to start off with that today on the show. Again, if you want to weigh in on the show, 833-288-0973, 833-288-0973. Let me know what you think about the Padres potentially not trying to spend too much during the offseason, back-to-back offseasons in a row. Telling their fan base, hey, look, we've already spent the money. This is the team that we have. We're going to try to add on the margins now. I want your thoughts on that. If you're listening on the app, on the Odyssey app, you can leave us a voice message. I'll play it on the air. If you go on the Odyssey app and you're listening on the app, it will say listen live. Top left, top right, it will say leave voicemail. It'll say voice message, I think. And you can leave a voice message on anything that you hear during the show. And then that way I can go through it and play it on the show. Obviously, it's just me here on a Sunday, so moving a lot of parts, pushing a lot of buttons. I'm like an octopus back here trying to keep everything in order and everything going smoothly. We'll talk Army-Navy tomorrow or in the next segment. This is the first time I didn't get to go to the Army-Navy game the last 3 years. They invited us again. It was kind of a situation in which not all of us were going to be able to go, at least from the Andy and Elston show. I had an opportunity to go kind of solo, but it was kind of a lot of moving parts for me to try to make it work. So I hope I'm able to go to that game again next year. That is just an awesome game to go watch in person. It's not as great on television. I mean, the beginning part is awesome. I mean, this is the first time for me watching the game on television in the last 3 years, 4 years. And so I went back to like, oh, this is why I wasn't watching this on TV in the past. But, you don't really watch for the game per se. You watch for the storylines. You watch for, what it means. And I love the saying, of course, the Army-Navy, it's the only game where the guys in the field would give their lives for the people watching in the stands or watching at home. And so that was a pretty cool game yesterday. Navy went out there and they showed up ready to do some serious damage, and they showed up standing on business. Army looked like they were reading their press clippings from the last couple of weeks, being ranked and almost being in the college football playoff and ranked the best O-line in the country. They won that award, and quarterback and Daly was, maybe a Heisman finalist. They did not play like that at all in that game, and Navy punched them in the mouth, and Army really didn't have too much to say on that. But we'll talk about that and what it means for college football. That game is like traditional college football, which is great to see. We'll preview the college football playoff since I will not be on air again next Sunday. This will be the last show of the season. We only have 5 days left of local programming here on 97.3 The Fan with Ben and Woods, Andy and Elston, and then Gwen and Chris in the afternoon. And then it's going to be a little bit of a blackout for some time as we all get to spend time with our families and everything like that. And not a lot too much going on in sports during that time frame anyway, but we will do that later on the show. We'll talk about, I thought the Aztecs did a pretty good job of keeping some of their talent last week for football purposes. I know they did lose Danny O'Neal. We'll talk more about that later on in the show, get you a preview of Week 15 in the National Football League, and let you know about who's in and who's out. Some inactives today for your fantasy teams. Fantasy playoffs this weekend, so I'll try to get that information out to you as soon as possible. But let's go back to the Padres for a second. Let's go back to the winter meetings. Let's go to where the Padres might be this offseason. And what's funny is I haven't updated the Open for this show aside from the first time. So it's been a year of the same Open. And I took from one of my shows the fact that the Padres shouldn't cut payroll, and they shouldn't punt on a season when you're in prime Manny Machado territory. And that's where they're at right now. I mean, Manny Machado's in his prime. And same with, Xander Bogaerts, even though he hasn't played very well in the last couple of years. He is also in his, quote-unquote prime, maybe near the near end of it. You got Fernando kind of coming into that spot, Musgrove, Darvish. I mean, you got a lot of players that are under contract with this organization that are on aging contracts. And when you have that, you got to be able to go out there and compete each and every year and be able to go toe-to-toe with some of the big boys. And I think the thing that gets lost on a lot of people, including our on-air hosts, are just that, you start talking about it. I understand the finances to an extent of what they allow us media members and us fans to know about the San Diego Padres. I understand. Look, we're not in a big media market. We don't have the same kind of level of spending in sponsorships. We don't have the same level of spending when it comes to our TV deal. Our TV deal has gotten wiped away with, Bally Sports, with Sinclair, running out of business. And so it's hard to compete with the, top echelon teams of the Los Angeles Dodgers and the New York Yankees and now the New York Mets, obviously, with the amount of money that they can spend and make mistakes on. So I understand all of that. The thing that's very difficult, I think, for a lot of Padres fans is to continually see a lot of prices going up And then the whole, we can't spend any money anymore because we spent it already. I think that's a tough sell to a lot of fans. Like, that's a real tough sell to a lot of fans. I think it's easy for us in the media to just, toe the line and talk about, like, well, this is what they have to do. But at the same time, most of us get to go to games for free because we work the games and we get to cover it. And there's some perks to this job. It's not, it's not the same, right? Where somebody that's like trying to bring their family of four to a game and it's costing them like thousands of dollars. Almost as much as it costs them to like go to Disneyland, which it shouldn't be. It shouldn't be the same in terms of the prices. So, it's hard. It's a hard pill to swallow for a lot of fans when, they're doing their job on part of this deal. And the Padres, they have done their job in terms of spending on talent. But when you see the team up in LA continue to add a lot of pieces, and when you see all these other teams that you're competing with in the National League just to get to a World Series continue to spend money, to go the whole approach of, well, it worked last year, why wouldn't it be able to work this year? I think it's a tough sell for a lot of fans. And I think that they would have the means to be able to spend a little bit, probably more than what they're saying. I mean, the latest article from Kevin Acee was like, they don't really want to go anywhere over where they were last year in 2024. They spent $169 million last year. And that's not luxury tax payroll. That's just their payroll in general. And their estimated final 2024 payroll from last year, according to Fangraphs, was $169. That's something that they don't want to be too north of. Right now, their estimated 2025 payroll is $210 million. That's already on the books. That's not without adding anybody. That's not including maybe signing Profar. That's not including, going out and getting another pitcher. I mean, that is already spent. That money's already been spent. So in order to do that, you're going to have to start cutting some of these contracts. And you start looking at some of these contracts that you want somebody else to pay for. There's not a lot on there that is worth trading for if you're another team. The only one that might be worth trading for is probably Fernando. But that would be a catastrophically bad idea to raise ticket prices and everything, which I understand. It's part of doing business. But then to trade him would just be like astronomically bad. They would have a major problem on their hands. And by the way, Fernando's got a no-trade clause, so it's not even like, you'd have to find a spot that he would want to go to be able to move that contract. That would be the only one that has, and I'm saying, value to it. Where Fernando's going to play, he's already playing above what he's making currently. He's going to probably play above what he is expected to play, he is expected to get paid later on. So that one's out of the book. So that can't do that. I mean, you're not going to trade Joe Musgrove, right? Nobody's going to take him for $20 million a year when he's got an injury. Local product again. I think you'd have problems on your hand. Nobody's going to take a Yu Darvish contract, which I think he doesn't have I don't think he has a trade clause either. So, and he's only getting $18 million this year. He'll get $18 million to the AAV. He's got $21 million this year, and then 16, 15, 15. It's not like it's really going to help you too much. Jake Cronenworth, maybe. You could part ways with Robert Suarez. The only ones that you're really thinking about here would be a Luis Ariza or Dylan Cease. Because you don't really know exactly what they're going to get. Fangraphs expects them to get $14 million and $13 million, but around $15 million each between the both of them. Dylan Cease is most likely going to walk at the end of the year. He seems like the most logical choice. So if you trade those guys, you might free up another $30 million, which still gives you another $10 million you'd have to free up just to get to that number that the Padres said they don't really want to go a lot higher than. That's, again, you're just subtracting guys. You're not adding anybody. Unless you're adding some future potential or potentially adding some prospects you can then flip for other players, which I can totally see the Padres doing. So by saying all this, you have to start thinking about things outside the box. You got to start getting creative. It's not just signing players, because you have to try to keep pace with a lot of these teams in the National League that you're competing with. That is the Los Angeles Dodgers. That is the New York Mets. That is the Philadelphia Phillies. That is the Atlanta Braves. I mean, these are all teams that are going to come back with a lot of talent, just like the Padres. It's being able to outlast the Arizona Diamondbacks and the Giants of the world, and maybe the second best team in the Central. But, the Chicago Cubs has traded for Kyle Tucker. I mean, it is an arms race right now in the National League. And so, again, when it comes to I don't really know if we're going to spend money and yada, 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 it's still a tough ask for a lot of fans. They start looking at the writing on the wall and where everything's going. And, yes, I know the Padres have already spent the money, but they still got a lot of holes that they got to fix. And they got to find ways to be creative to help plug a lot of these holes. And some of that might be uncorking other holes in your dam to try to fix other problems. Maybe it's a Robert Suarez. Maybe he's a luxury you can no longer afford. Maybe you can, pull away with the Jason Adam back there as a closer, and then if you are competing at the deadline, you could try to go find a closer that doesn't make as much money as Robert Suarez. Robert Suarez is an opt-out at the end of the year. He's going to be good as gone, too. He's going to test his market in free agency, especially if he has a good year. Then I got to replace him with other closers. Well, maybe I do it with Adam, and then I got to reload the bullpen. I got to go maybe young here. Maybe I got to go find some other pieces in other spots. I mean, there's other ways you could do this, but as creative as A.J. Preller was last year, he's going to have to be even more creative this year. I do want to mention what Annie said on Friday's show, and I think it kind of clears things up a little bit about the financials and how this thing works with the Padres, because I think a lot of people are just going with, well, this is Cassenda's fault because he's in charge now and he doesn't want to spend the money, and Peter was spending his money and all this other. It didn't work like that. We had the full clip on Friday's show. I'm going to try to explain to you what Annie said and really inform what happens when it comes to the Padres and what it takes to spend money and what they have to do in order to spend a little bit more money and how that affects them moving forward as they try to recuperate a lot of their money. It makes a lot more sense when you start figuring out how the financials work for the ownership group of the Padres, which is more than just, Peter Seidler's stake in the team. We'll talk about that when we come back. This is the Braden Surprenant Show, live and local each and every Sunday morning from 8 to 10, San Diego's number one sports station, 97.3 The Fan. Welcome back to the Braden Surprenant Show, live and local each every Sunday morning from 8 to 10. If you want to join the show today, 833-288-0973, 833-288-0973. Talking about the Padres offseason, and obviously that article with Kevin Acee on, was that Thursday? I think it was Thursday. Talking about the Padres, and I want to spend money, and yada, 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 yada. We had some good insight out of Annie Halbrin on Thursday, talking about kind of the inner workings of how the organization and how a lot of these organizations work when it comes to spending money. Again, there are ownership groups. They're not just, one owner that has his own money. It's not the Padres are not run like Cohen runs the Mets, where he could just write a check right if he wants to and he can go get somebody. Same thing with Artie Moreno in Anaheim, which is not as comparison, right? Because he doesn't spend as much money as Cohen, but he's done that in the past. Some of these other guys that have gone in there and the owners that go out and sign the big contracts, while the general manager makes, more moves on the margins. But the thing with the Padres, they have an ownership group and they have different people that have stakes in the team. And Annie does a good job of trying to explaining how those last couple of years when the Padres were spending a lot of money, and people were just assuming it was Peter Seidler just, put more money forward. He might have spearheaded it, but he still needed approval by a lot of different members of the ownership group. And I've broken up this excerpt from Annie, from the Annie and Elston show on Thursday, into a couple of different chunks that we can break down. The first one, of course, is talking about that, the realization of it wasn't just Peter Seidler's money. There's kind of like a collective group here that needs to make this thing happen.
Reported, and we've seen it reported now from a few sources, when Kevin mentioned that this was not Peter Seidler's money. I think that there's sometimes a misconception that the money that was spent on this team in the last few years was just taken out of his pocket, and that's simply not true. It was taken out of loans, and it was taken out of capital calls, which came out of his pocket, plus the rest of the ownership. They all have a percentage that they put in to make some of these things happen. And the thing about the capital calls is you can't do them all the time. If I am wanting to buy into the Minnesota Twins and I sit down with the owner and we go over it and he's got to vet my background information and make sure I have the financials. And he says, we're going to do capital calls maybe every other year. You're going to have to put in another $20 million because we're going to try to get so-and-so. I have to be comfortable with that. Now, if you get into the actual ownership and then you find out that they're doing double the capital calls that they originally told you, or that they're just asking for it more, you start to wonder, hey, is there something going wrong that they're financially, what's going on in the financial books? But also, maybe that's not what you signed up for. So you have to be careful with capital calls because you don't want to piss off your ownership so much that they then want to exit the ownership. And by the way, when you exit, typically you're not just trying to get the investment back, the return on the money that you put in, but you're trying to get now, you should fairly get the capital calls that you put on top of that. So now you're paying that person more when he or she exits, which some owners have done, like they do in every team over the last few years, even with the Padres.
So as Annie was talking about, and there's another couple of clips in there, it wasn't just Peter Seidler's money. So it's as much as it's he wanted to go out there and win, and, obviously, and his health wasn't very good, and, trying to put together a team, before, he ended up, passing away to potentially win a World Series. And even though he was the spearhead of it, it wasn't just his money. It's collective from all the owners that have already put in millions of dollars and tens and hundreds of millions of dollars to be part of the ownership group. Then you're asking for more money into it so they can pay for said players. And this does happen all the time. It does happen all the time with a lot of teams in Major League Baseball, but you couldn't do this every single year. Otherwise, the owners are just hemorrhaging money. And unless you get your return on your investment when you sell, it's asking a lot for a lot of these owners. Now, that being said, that's why I have always said, and a lot of people have said, the best ownership to have are the ones that treat their team like it's a toy, because they're just trying to win. It's not like their main source of income is being the owner of a professional franchise. It's very lucrative It's a very, it's a good investment. I know a lot of people say it's not. It is when you sell the team eventually. It's like putting money into a house. It's the same thing. When you buy a house for a lower value and you put money into the house, and then you continue to you remodel the kitchen, and you remodel this, and you redo the backyard, and you start putting tons of money into the house for a little bit of your enjoyment, you get the return on your investment in a couple of ways. One, your enjoyment, and two, when you sell it, it will most likely be higher in value than it was when you bought it, and that's where you make your money back, right? So those are some of the things that are like the same with professional sports teams. So when these owners continue to put money forward, you can see why eventually they would want to kind of tone things down. Now, we don't know what's going on with the meetings, but it's interesting to see the way that they've put this together. Now, obviously, they can't do a capital call again. They don't want to, and this is the way that ownership's going to try to make some of their money back is by not trying to overspend. And I think the TV contract plays a lot into that too. Andy talks more about this and goes in a little bit more detail. We're going to talk about that in just a little bit. We got to take a quick break. This is the Braden Surprenant Show, live and local, each and every Sunday morning from 8 to 10 on San Diego's #1 sports station, 97.3 The Fan.
Guess what their new norm
Braden Surprenant Show, live and local each and every Sunday morning. Thanks again for all of you for joining us and making our morning a part of yours. A crisp December morning here in America's finest city. Hopefully you guys all got home safely, had a good time at all your holiday parties over the weekend. Big holiday party weekend this weekend. I don't know if next weekend's going to be the same. It might be. It's because it's the final week of, I think, a lot of people when it comes to work for 2024, or a handful of you that will be working throughout the holidays. And a hats off to all of you keeping our city going and running, especially all the blue-collar workers out there that, have to work almost every single day and doing some hard labor and keeping our city looking good all the time. So appreciate all of you. And again, thanks again for tuning in, whether you be going to church this morning or some type of youth event. It's good to be talking local sports with all of you. If you want to weigh in, 833-288-0973, 833-288-0973. You can now leave a voice message on the app, on the Odyssey app. Feel free to do that as well. I do want to continue this conversation. A lot of things that Annie said are pretty good, of just kind of explaining what the ownership group has done, and how it kind of works and where they can get their money from and everything like that. So I already talked about kind of the capital calls that the ownership group has done. And then a lot of people, obviously, the other thing that they've talked about is, Eric Katsenda and like what his role is with this team, with the Padres, and him taking over as the head guy in charge right now on an interim basis. Here's Annie from Thursday's show talking more about that.
You have this ebb and flow. This is not unusual. What was the hard part for the Padres was they hit the top of that debt ceiling. Every team has debt, but they hit the top of that debt ceiling, and that's when MLB comes in and says, too many loans. We are concerned about the health of the organization. We don't want you to spend in relation to that debt. So that was a lot of what they did last year, right? I'm not sure exactly if there's actually a thumb on them right now from MLB. I've actually heard that there isn't anymore. That was more last year. However, they're still having to pay off certain things and also just kind of figure out, I guess, what their new normal is. What happened the last few years really isn't a new normal. It was a deviation that got a lot of fans excited, as it should have, really packed the ballpark, got everyone, hoping for a very competitive team, which they got. They got a competitive team last year. And now, again, you have the task of continuing that for years to come under new financial constraints. Okay. Now, as you talked about yesterday, Craig, they have it all in place already. They've got a lot of commitments that they made.
Correct.
This isn't the end of the world. They've got, and as Kevin wrote at the top of his article, they've spent big money in recent years on players who comprise the core of a roster. They spent that money. Think of it like an investment. They invested that money. And now, just like you would, maybe if you're running up a credit card, you've got to pause. You can't run up that credit card so much anymore. You've got to pay it off. And you might never be able to run up that credit card as much as you did the last few years. And that's why when I talk about, it's how you view it. Is it palatable to you to do that? It's palatable to some owners, and other owners would have gone a more conservative route, maybe incrementally, brought things up over time so that there's not such a shift, right? On top of that, you have the TV money, which they're not making nothing on the TV money. My understanding is they're making about half. So say they were making $60 million, now they're making about $30 million. What that changes to this year because they're not being backstopped by anything, I'm not entirely sure. But the last thing I'll say, and that this is something to consider as well, is Eric Katsenda is the interim control person. I see a lot of people kind of putting this on Eric Katsenda. This was always going to have to happen. Whether Peter was alive today, they were going to have to slow down on the financials, okay, because that was what MLB was imposing.
All right, so that was mostly on the financials, obviously, with just where they're at with spending, right? And we talked about the capital calls, and then we talked about where the spending goes, and then all of a sudden Major League Baseball starts getting involved because they look at some of the things and they're like, you guys are spending more than you're getting right now, and so we have to slow this thing down and stop asking the owners to continue to spend money into the organization. And then the last thing that Annie had to say about this kind of situation before we really dive into what the Padres can and cannot do is obviously who's going to be the main figure in charge now, because again, this is still an interim position for Eric Katsenda.
But Eric Katsenda was made the control person as an exception to the rule for MLB. The control person for a club is the person with 15% or more interest that they then make the control person. There wasn't someone that was willing to take on that role because Peter passed so suddenly. Okay, Eric Katsenda knows Peter well, understands the financial, goings-ons of everything, is a businessman. He comes in, he's able to sit down, he's able to boom, 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 get going right away. Unless MLB makes another exception for them this year, which I don't think that they will, but they could. They can make another exception for them this year. Eric Katsenda is out. So now they've got to decide who is the new control person. And is there harmony at the top of who the new control person is? Or is there maybe a little disharmony? Maybe it's not as harmonious as it could be as they figure this out, right?
In terms of jockeying for the top, you mean?
Right, exactly. I don't know that for sure. I'm just kind of going off of what these things tend to sometimes, be. Like you've got to now figure out who's the new control person. MLB has to approve that person. That person, who knows if a lot changes or not? Because when you look at I can speak for when the Union Tribune gets sold to a new company, the first year is usually not a lot changes. Like the first year, the new ownership comes in, they want to learn about how you're doing things, and they kind of are hands off a little bit as they understand the lay of the land. Then they go in and they start to get more hands on, right? So nothing, for all I know, nothing could change. You could get a new control person at the top and everything really stays the same. They kind of trust the people below them to continue doing things as they've been doing them, or a new person could want more, right? But these are the kind of different things that you're dealing with as things get closer to spring training. And that's why I think it's important too to go, they do have a core of players that they've really invested in, and that is a competitive core of players. They've already put that money in. But two, I don't know what the future is. They could spend a ton of money next year for all I know. They could spend less money for all I know. It's very hard to know what exactly the next 5 years entail. So I don't think that, but I say that in a positive way. I don't necessarily think that it's all doom and gloom. I think it really just depends on what happens with the TV thing, what happens with, the rest of MLB, what happens with the CBA, what happens, there's just a lot to determine as they go along this road.
That was really well said by Annie on Thursday's show to kind of explain how it works, especially with the Padres. I mean, Eric Katsenda, again, he has an interim basis. He's just kind of filling the void of what Peter Seidler was with the organization. You have to have at least 15% stake in the ownership to be the lead person of the ownership, the one that deals with Major League Baseball and everything like that. As Annie alluded to, nobody really wanted to jump in and be that person with it happening so close to Peter's death. And so it was Eric Katsenda, who was the right-hand man of Peter Seidler for a long time. He's not an owner of the team. They didn't give him ownership of the team. He's just kind of being the head figure that they needed him to be. And so now they're going to have to find a new person. They're going to have to find somebody that has 15% of the team or more and be in charge and be that main owner in the San Diego Padres. I mean, that's a lot of moving parts behind the scenes before you start determining how much money you are willing to spend. And maybe, as Annie alluded to, maybe the new person that is in charge of the San Diego Padres from an ownership standpoint and that head figure that represents the Padres for Major League Baseball, maybe that person's like Peter and wants to spend money and wants to win a championship. Maybe that person is not. Maybe he wants to run it like a business. And again, it has to get approval by the rest of the owners. This is not just a one-man acting party that puts a ton of money into the team on his own accord and his own dime. It's not like Steve Cohen with the Mets, who puts it all in on his own. Right? Who could just write checks? He's worth $20 billion. It's a little bit of a different situation. And the other things that factor in it as well. It's obviously the TV contract. They're getting half of what it was. It's not nothing, but it's only half. So that's a major blow. You don't know what the CBA is going to be. At the end of the 2026 season, this thing is going to be completely halted, especially with the way some organizations are paying money and some are not. So there's a lot of extenuating circumstances when it comes to finances for the San Diego Padres. And it's not just the Padres. There's a lot of teams that are involved that have similar problems. I mean, not as many problems when it comes to who's in charge of this team right now. But definitely some issues on the sense of, what is Major League Baseball going to look like in the next couple of years? Is there going to be a salary cap? Is there going to be a salary floor? Are they going to raise the taxes on the luxury tax? Are they going to eliminate the luxury tax if you have a salary cap? I mean, what's the league minimum of players going to be? I mean, what's the TV contract and revenue sharing going to be with Major League Baseball? How's that going to work? I mean, there's a lot of problems that Major League Baseball has to solve financially, which I know will probably lead to a lockout after the 2026 season. Not a lot of teams know what it's going to look like, what the outcome's going to be with all of that. So there's a lot of moving pieces to this. And so when you see in all these big teams spending a lot of money, it's almost like, hey, let's just try to spend as much as we can now while we have the opportunity to do so and try to rack up some wins before we get to this point. Maybe that's what the big teams are thinking. Maybe that's what the big market teams are thinking. Like the Dodgers, like the Mets, the Phillies, some of the teams that have big TV contracts, the New York Yankees that are trying to utilize as much of it as possible before they might maybe centralize what the TV contracts are going to be, like you see in the National Football League. I mean, we got the NFL on today, and we got teams from all sorts of markets being able to compete because of the way they have structured everything in the National Football League. That is salary caps and salary floors. That is revenue sharing. That is a centralized TV contracts. That is, kind of a splitting of a lot of different things. I mean, that's what you get in the National Football League. Is it the best of the players? No, it's not. I mean, what are they going to do with some of these potential contracts and how they play things out? That's all part of the CBA. So when you look at kind of everything that's playing out, and I think, again, I mean, it's frustrating to see, right? It's frustrating from a fan perspective of they're right there. They're right there. And you listen to the Dodgers, who just won the World Series, talk about how tough the Padres were and how they gave them a run for their money and all this other stuff. They're right there. And when you go from a team that was just felt like it was their year and so close to then lose a couple pieces in the offseason and then go like, look, we already spent the money. We don't have time to we don't have the money to improve and make that next push. It's tough for fans to consume that information in a positive light. It just is. Season ticket prices going up. How much does it cost to park there? How much does it cost to do this? How much does it cost to do that? I feel like a lot of the Padres fans are exhausted to the same point of like they've never won a championship here in San Diego. Now, what was the last championship? The AFL championship in the 60s when the Chargers beat the Boston Patriots at Balboa Stadium, whatever it was called back then. That San Diego High now plays their football games at. I mean, that's like the last major championship for the city of San Diego. So you can see how fans are like looking at up the road at the team that just knocked them out, who already was playing by different rules, playing by even more different rules, and adding more pieces. And so you see that, and then you look at your own team, and you see like, we don't know if we could spend because we got to like kind of make up on some of the lost ground that we had on the capital calls. You kind of have to understand the perspective of both sides of the aisle here. Now, that being said, I mean, ownership groups definitely do have a lot more money than they are probably leading on. And they probably have more to spend than they're leading on. But again, it's a business. They take on all the risk. They're the ones taking on all the risk. They have a spot where they're comfortable in terms of making money, and feeling comfortable about the future of the franchise. So none of those owners have to sell the team, right? And so they do have to play that into an account. But the Padres are going to have to get really creative. And it's either going to be trades or it's going to be a trade of Cease away, using those pieces, trade back for somebody else, trying to flip the resources they have and what they're willing to put together to try to, make it a complete roster. And at this point last year, it was the same thing. What are the Padres going to do? Sounds like they want to be underneath at least they had the narrative of like, we want to be underneath the luxury tax. We can't go over that for the third straight year. I think that's fair. I think that's fair on their part. But again, last year, I mean, the team didn't fully get completed until Luis Arias showed up, and that was during the season. Now, I always go back to this analogy. that Doug Gottlieb had on his show a long time ago about remodeling his house. And his wife being upset with the way it was looking. I don't like this, and this is not what I asked for. But he simply said, you just wait for it to be finished. It's not finished yet. You can't really make an assumption. You can't really make an opinion. You can't have an opinion on it until it's done. It's a bunch of studs in the room, right? Concrete, and until that room is finished and complete, you can't make your opinions on it, right? You can't have a feeling on it either way until it's done. The room is not finished. And I said this last year, and last year at the time where I was talking about it, it wasn't a complete room. And it was on paper looking like a fourth place team. And then, Jackson Merrill came through, right? Jackson Merrill was a guy that played out of his mind as a rookie. And Jurickson Profar had a career year. And you got some veteran presence with David Peralta and Donovan Solano. You go and you add a starting pitcher in Dylan Cease. As you're ready to get on a plane to fly to South Korea to start the season, you pick up an ace-type pitcher. And there's always going to be some of those players out there. And you know what? There's only so much you can spend on guys. And I know they don't have the one Soto piece that could potentially flip for a lot of great pieces back. But, I could see them doing that with Dylan Cease. They flipped Drew Thorpe from the Yankees trade for Juan Soto to the White Sox, end up getting you Dylan Cease. So maybe that's another avenue that they can go. Adding more prospects back, flipping those prospects for other players that might be making a little bit less in arbitration, right? And setting yourself up for what is a same level payroll, but just different value in different spots. I just think it's tough for a lot of Padres fans. They've been given steak so many times in a row that it's almost expected, and then you get a couple of, went from a filet, now it's kind of a New York, and now you're going, is that skirt steak? Is that skirt steak on the table? I've been used to the fillets. What's with the skirt steak? Still getting steak. It's just not as nice of a steak as you were getting before. But that being said, and I think the positive thing, and I'm on both sides of here. I understand both sides of the argument. I understand both sides of this conversation. I understand the fan perspective, right? Being here, being born and raised in San Diego, not seeing a championship, being so close so many times, not have it work out. And then I also see the side, we got to look at it from the money perspective as well. Even though we all think they probably could spend a little bit more than they're alluding to, I think there's something to be said about the way they have to kind of redo a lot of things and fix some problems behind the scenes, especially with not having a TV contract. You're still getting steak. It's just a little bit different than what it was before because you spent the money already on other products. And if they have a good year out of Xander Bogaerts, it changes things. Maybe that is the big risk that they take here in 2025 as Xander goes out there and plays up to his contract. Said the same thing about Jake Cronenworth last year. Jake was not playing up to the $12 million he was getting. And then all of a sudden last year, he played up to about the $12 million he was getting. Xander plays up to the 25. He plays up to half of that. You're in a lot better shape. Another good year of Fernando. And you start looking around the teams in Major League Baseball you're competing with. The Padres are a playoff team as of right now. I think they're a playoff team. Even though they haven't really made any moves or done anything, they're still relatively a playoff team. We're getting into football mode when we come back. 833-288-0973. 833-288-0973. Mitch, Kevin, if you're on hold, stay there. We'll get to your phone calls as well. Braden Surprenant Show live and local each every Sunday morning from 8 to 10. San Diego's #1 sports station, 97.3 The Fan. Hour number 2 on the Braden Surprenant Show. We're going to try to transition in some football, but I do know that a lot of you guys want to talk some Padres baseball still here in December. Last Braden Surprenant Show of 2024, as we will be off next week to celebrate the holidays. So hopefully all of you guys are getting ready for the holiday season. I guess it's already the holiday season, right? Does Thanksgiving start the holiday season with all the holidays that are in December and everything like that? I would say so, right? Holidays start with Thanksgiving, or do they start in December? I feel like it would start with Thanksgiving, but who knows? Hopefully you guys are all having time to meet with your families and everything like that. Should be great time for all of us. And I want to get to your phone calls again, 833-288-0973, 833-288-0973. Let's start with Jesse in North Park. Jesse, what's going on here on the Braden Surprenant Show?
Good morning, Braden. Hey, I was just wondering, what are your thoughts about people wanting to sell the team so soon? I think it's like a narrative that's just so early. It's just, I don't know, just people giving up so soon. And it's just, I don't know, it just kind of ticks me off the fact that people are just so quick on wanting to sell a team just because we are in this little hitch with our payroll.
Yeah, I think that's a little bit of an overreaction for a lot of people. I mean, obviously, it's not having Peter there really driving the ship of trying to get more and more for the roster and everything like that. It's going to turn people the wrong way and thinking that the team needs to be sold to somebody else like him. There's not a lot of guys that are buying or people that are buying teams that operate like Peter Seidler did. And like, Steve Cohen wants to do, because Steve Cohen grew up a Mets fan. He's got all this money and just wants to, just be a gigantic Mets fan running the team. I mean, it's hard to find those type of owners and then those guys to get approved by Major League Baseball. So it's the same thing with like firing a coach, right? Everybody always wants to fire a coach or maybe like get rid of a player, but until you have an alternative to the situation, it really just falls on deaf ears. So I don't know what people are. I think it's kind of ridiculous, to see some of those kind of comments like that. But Jesse, I appreciate the phone call.
All right, thank you, Braden.
Let's get out to Mitch in New Jersey. Mitch, what's going on? How's your Sunday doing?
Pretty good. I'm driving down to Virginia. See my brother, my sister. God bless my mom. In 2 weeks, we'll be having a celebration for 92 years in his life. Happy holidays to you and your family.
Appreciate that, Mitch. And I send the same to you. Hopefully, you have a good day with the fam today down in Virginia. What do you got for me today?
Right. Well, first of all, and also, I hope your high school students and mainly your football players are on the right track. Bosco couldn't be met a day, maybe next year. But hopefully USC and San Diego, future Pac-12, can wheel in some of these LA players. San Diego, there's a lot of talent out there. I'm tired of them going to Georgia, Alabama. They're doing something fishy, but now it's legal now. It's all under the NL umbrella. But I've gone off course a little bit here. I'll get back. Before I get to the NFL, I'm telling you, Soto really took a gamble. This is not good for baseball. It's just totally ridiculous. I mean, he's a real good player, a great hitter. Everything else is average. I mean, the CBA, don't tell me we're going to have a strike. They have some balance. So it's like there's 12 teams. It's almost like college football. Half the teams in the FBS, more than half, have no shot. That's why there's 12 games. I'm really going to topics and topics, but I'm sorry. You could say 12, 15 teams in baseball will never have a shot at winning a World Series if this continues to happen.
I agree with you, Mitch.
Money, the Mets. I'm sorry?
I said I agree with you, Mitch. What do you got? What's your last thing you got?
It's just tough. I mean, but the team does get another hitter, another pitcher, or even a bullpen. Because, these Dodgers set up a new thing now, bullpen committee, instead of having a starter, which I don't like, but I guess it worked for them. So everybody's going to copy them, I bet. With NFL, there's a chance it can happen, and most likely somebody goes in college and baseball. Wow, I am amazing. What do you think, Sandy? Chargers and Lions in Super Bowl, what do you think? You have a nice week. Maybe I'll talk to you during the week. If not, be safe.
All right, Mitch. Thanks again for the phone call. And he went through a lot there. We'll start with the college football stuff with recruiting. Obviously, the Trinity League is what he's talking about. Yeah, Bosco, they got smoked by Mater Dei in the regular season. And then in the playoffs, Bosco did give Mater Dei a run for their money in the CIF championship, the Southern Section in Division One. Mater Dei this year is just better than everybody else. I mean, they destroyed De La Salle last night. They went 37-15. Last night was the final night of the high school football season here in California with the Open Division Championship, state championship completed. So Mater Dei is the best team in California. They're already the best team in California and probably in the country. They ended up knocking off De La Salle. Lincoln won last night, or 2 nights ago on Friday, which is great for San Diego, Division One AA champion, as they outlasted Pittsburgh by 2. 28-26. El Cap had some trouble with Carmel. Carmel ended up winning that division, and then I don't think Monte Vista won last night either. So San Diego gets 1 championship out of the 6 they sent to state. So decent performance there out of the San Diego section. A lot of those talented players in the Trinity League, as we mentioned, they go to Georgia and Ohio State and Alabama and Oregon. I mean, Oregon gets a lot of the West Coast kids now. It'd be nice for the Southern California teams to be able to keep some of those kids, as Mitch mentioned. Lions Chargers Super Bowl. I mean, I can see the Lions making it there. I don't know. I think the Chargers are like edging out wins and everything like that, but they've been playing a last place schedule and they haven't really done anything that spectacular against really good teams. The Bucks come in today in Los Angeles pretty top of their division, only 1 game above 500, but they've been playing a lot better. I think it'd be a good test for the Chargers. And then the Broncos on Thursday is going to be very difficult, I think, for the Chargers. They flexed that game to a Thursday night game, so that one should be fun. That will be a real big test for anybody of you that's still a Chargers fan out there. I can see the Lions. Lions are the team to beat right now in the National Football League. I mean, they've done a phenomenal job all season against the competition they've been against. But, that's what I think I answered everything that Mitch brought up. The Juan Soto deal, it's utterly insane to give somebody that's a 1 to maybe 2 tool player that kind of money. I mean, he gets more money than the guy that's like arguably one of the best players in Major League Baseball history in Shohei Ohtani, who could pitch and hit. I mean, Juan Soto could basically just hit. He's not that great of a fielder. He's an okay base runner. No, he's got a good arm, I guess. But, like, aside from that, I mean, it's just basically hitting for $765 million. This is going to lead to a lockout or a strike in 2026. And that's for sure. 833-288-0973, 833-288-0973. Let's get on down to Chula Vista. Kevin weighing in. Kevin, what's going on?
Good morning, Braden. Hey, thanks for the conversation about this problem with the Padres and finances. I know a lot of people don't like to hear it, don't want to talk about it. I'm sorry to digress off of your NFL here, but I wanted to thank you and Annie and Craig and Kevin Acey, especially for bringing up what needs to be talked about here, because the conditions, as you pointed out, have changed dramatically from when Peter Seidler, Ron Fowler bought the team, in which there was a TV contract that was giving them a guaranteed $60 million a year plus. That's dried up. You've got a situation where the financial dynamics of baseball spending vis-a-vis the Dodgers, Yankees, et cetera, the deep-pocketed TV teams have just changed the landscape dramatically from when this team was purchased by Peter and his family and Ron. So here we are. We're coming into, as you pointed out, present day, expecting AJ to pull a rabbit out of his hat 2 years in a row. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see until March the 28th. But I think a key date coming up for this franchise is probably 2 years or 3 years from now, when the new collective bargaining agreement comes up. And a lot of these issues, baseball is going to have to come to grips with, because as you've pointed out, it's not just the Padres that are going to have these financial barriers that are becoming deeper and deeper and deeper. It's a lot of teams, but Padres, because of where we're located and the market that we are in, we're probably going to suffer the most. So what we're stuck with right now are 5 or 6 contracts that we can't get out of, and then we have to cobble together every year this merry-go-round of what's left. So when you say and talk about remodeling a house, if you've got the money to put in gold-plated faucets, you're going to put in gold-plated faucets. But if you're like the Padres and you don't have that, then you've got to downgrade and hope that what you do get is satisfactory enough to make the renovation complete. If I could, put that kind of illustration to it. So I think we need to keep talking about this. There's a lot of people investing a lot of money to go to the Padres, thousands of dollars a year, and the narrative that the ownership group is not putting money into this. Look, you've got private investors here. We don't know the extent and the depth. And here's the important point: these investors, Braden, if you're into private equity, you know a little bit about it, which I'm sure you do. You get a prospectus when you put your money in, and there's an expected rate of return that you think you're going to get a reasonable rate of return. When those things begin to dry up, and I've done private equity investing, you get a little bit nervous, and then you start making telephone calls, and you start trying to find out, what's my options as an investor in the future? Can I get out of this? Do I need to sell? Are we going to be able to correct this and purchase more shares, et cetera? So there's a lot of moving parts, as you pointed out, in the future here, which we're not privy to. But beware, because it's out there, and a lot of these things need to be solved for this team to be reasonably competitive in the future beyond just making the playoffs. If the ultimate goal is the World Series, we've got a steep road to climb in that regards, because it hasn't been done yet, even with all the guys that they've gotten and the money that they've spent.
Yeah, 100%, Kevin, and that's the perspective that we have to give out sometimes when you start looking at, well, we were able to spend this much money before. How come we're not able to spend this much money now? And it's a hard place to be in right now, because you've given Padres fans a lot of big pieces, and you were this focal point of the winter meetings for like 3 to 4 years in a row, and every big target was rumored to go to the Padres, and then you went from that to, Kyle Higashioka might be too much money to bring back, and that's a hard pill to swallow, especially when everything goes up in terms of prices at Petco Park.
Well, and we've gone through this, those of us who are old enough, since 1969 with the Padres franchise, in various shapes, forms, and descriptions. Ownership groups have come and they have gone. Many of them, most of them, have not made a lot of money in the day-to-day finances of the franchise. They do make it, as you point out, on the sale. That's where they get their money back. But as far as day-to-day operations in this market, it is extremely difficult to end up with profits that are going to satisfy people that have put money in, expecting some type of reasonable rate of return. And that's just who we are. That's what we are. In San Diego, we're at the cul-de-sac, and the market here, you're in it. And it's a very difficult market, business-wise, to compete against the big guys that are out there that are up, north and east of us. That's just the way it is, and we got to grasp it and come to grips with it. This is who we are and what we are. Absolutely, Kevin. Appreciate the phone call. We'll look forward to talking to you again. Thanks, Braden. Take care, bud. It's Kevin in Chula Vista weighing in. That's all factual information about the San Diego Padres and some of their spending spots. When we come back, I know it's fantasy playoff time. We'll get you the actives and inactives for the early games, and if we got any news on the afternoon games, we'll pass that along as well. Plus, coming up, a weekend, or should I say Week 15 preview of the National Football League as we get you closer to the NFL kicking off in about 45 minutes. As we do have the NFL show that follows us here on 97.3 The Fan. I'm Braden Surprenant. It's the Braden Surprenant Show. If you want to weigh in, 833-288-0973, 833-288-0973. You can also leave a voice message on the Odyssey app, and I can play that for you as well. We did get a couple of those out there. We'll play those when we come back. Thanks again for tuning in to the Braden Surprenant Show, live and local each every Sunday morning from 8 to 10 on San Diego's #1 sports station, 97.3 The Fan.
Braden Surprenant Show live and local each and every Sunday morning. Talking Padres baseball with you. We'll dive into the NFL as well. During the break, I saw a hilarious video by the Miami Heat. The Miami Heat, on their own content page, were showing videos of all of their players signing jerseys at like a jersey signing thing. He's just going through, signing their own jersey, kind of mass jersey signing thing. And then in each stack of jerseys for each player, they put a jersey of the rival school of the school they attended to see if they would sign it. And everybody immediately is like, oh, nope, not signing that. Or I'm not signing this BS. I'm not signing and some derogatory comment towards their college rival, which is just super funny. I love when teams create accounts like that, and in different videos and content like that. It's pretty funny. You can see these guys use that human element with a lot of these players, these professional athletes that we put at like a high pedestal all the time. 833-288-0973, 833-288-0973. You can also leave a voice message on the Odyssey app if you would like. Let's talk about what's going on in the National Football League with who's active and who's inactive on an NFL Sunday, with playoff implications for all your fantasy lineups out there. Try to get this out as early as possible since we still have some time for you to go out there and make some moves. 10 a.m. games out here on the West Coast. We'll start with Baltimore. Baltimore Ravens. Deontay Johnson is suspended from the team. That is a team decision. He will not play today. Rashad Bateman is ready to play with a knee injury. Johnson's refusal to go in for Bateman when he got hurt in Week 13 is the reason he's suspended. I don't know why anybody that has Deontay Johnson still has him on their team. If you do and you're holding out hope, he ain't playing today, so go find somebody else. Raheem Blackshear, the running back for Carolina, is questionable with a chest injury. If he could suit up, he'll be the primary backup to Chuba Hubbard for Carolina. Cleveland, the Browns, hamstring injury for David Njoku. He is questionable today. Lack of practice all week makes this a game-time decision. Jordan Akins is the likely tight end starter for the Browns if Njoku sits, again with a hamstring injury and not practicing all week. Even if he does play, I can't imagine him getting significant fantasy points for you. And David Njoku, questionable, the hamstring. Cedric Tillman, wide receiver for the Browns, is out with a concussion. Jerry Jeudy and Elijah Moore will get the bulk of wide receiver targets at least until Tillman can be cleared to play. Cedric Tillman out with a concussion. In Jacksonville, their tight end, Evan Ingram, is out with a shoulder injury. Surgery has ended his season. Brenton Strange is a huge downgrade. If you're looking desperately for a tight end in Jacksonville, you might have to pick up somebody elsewhere. Harrison Butker, kicker for Kansas City, questionable the knee injury. He was activated from the IR and is expected to play. Matthew Wright was waived, the kicker for Kansas City. So Harrison Butker is expected to play. He just got activated off the IR. So if you had Harrison Butker and been waiting to put him back in the lineup, now is the time. For Miami, the Dolphins, D. Eskridge is out with a knee injury. Meanwhile, Jalen Waddle was removed from the injury report and will play. Jalen Waddle is playing. D. Eskridge will not. So that's good news for all you Jalen Waddle fantasy owners. Grant DeBoer, receiver for Miami, is questionable with a shoulder. If he plays, he might get some of the looks left behind by Odell Beckham Jr. getting waived. I don't see that being a big problem for anybody in fantasy this week. Derek Carr, quarterback concussion, out. Jake Haener will get the start. It's clear downgrade for the Saints passing game. Something to look for if you have receivers for New Orleans. Bub Means, receiver for New Orleans, is out with an ankle injury. He is on the IR. Practiced a bit this week, but he's still not yet to return. Kevin Austin Jr. and Cedric Wilson Jr. should continue to be to see targets for New Orleans. New York Giants, Drew Lock, out with a heel injury. Tommy DeVito will start today for New York. Lock, who had been in a walking boot, could be the emergency 3 quarterback today for the G-Men, but Tommy DeVito will in fact start. Breece Hall, questionable with a knee injury. He's currently expected to play and handle lead back duties for the New York Jets. Breece Hall is questionable with a knee injury. Other personnel for the Jets, Tyler Conklin out due to personal reasons. Conklin didn't travel with the team as he and his wife await the birth of their child. Jeremy Ruckert will start for the Jets, but you should probably look elsewhere if you need a new tight end. Tyler Conklin out, did not travel with the team. Him and his wife are awaiting the birth of their child. Tony Pollard, Tennessee running back, is questionable with an ankle injury. All signs currently point to Pollard seeing his usual workload on Sunday. Not to fear if you have Tony Pollard in fantasy. Zane Gonzalez, the kicker for Washington, is questionable with a foot injury. Greg Joseph will step in if Gonzalez can't go during pregame warmups today. Noah Brown has a kidney injury. He is out and on the IR. Expect Demai Brown to see increased involvement for Washington. Jamison Crowder, wide receiver for Washington, questionable with a calf injury. He was activated from IR, but he may not be quite ready to significantly contribute. And that's a look at some of the morning games throughout the NFL. Taking a look at some afternoon contests, some news that we have already gotten from some of the 125 games and 1 o'clock games. A lot of them are pretty good today in the National Football League. Arizona's running back Amari DiMercado out with a back injury. James Conner and Trey Benson will likely handle all of the running back touches this week for the Cardinals. Dalton Kincaid is questionable with a knee injury as Buffalo takes on Detroit today. He should return for the first time since Week 10, but don't expect miracles in the tight end position if you have Dalton Kincaid. Quentin Morris, the other tight end for Buffalo, is questionable with a shoulder injury. Dawson Knox will still be in the mix for tight end targets for Buffalo today against Detroit. Indianapolis, Josh Downs is questionable with a shoulder injury. He'd be right back in the number one receiver mix for the Colts if he plays, but it's nowhere near a guarantee. Alston Doolin, the receiver for Indianapolis, is out with an ankle injury. Adonai Mitchell might jump into number 3 receiver duties this week for the Colts. Will Dissly, Chargers tight end, out with a shoulder injury. Stone Smart becomes an intriguing last-minute pivot. Ladd McConkey, wide receiver for the Chargers, is questionable with a knee. He was in a similar situation last week and did, in fact, sit. He may well play today, but can you really risk it in the fantasy playoffs? I don't know if the risk-reward is really there for you for Ladd McConkey, especially since the Chargers are in a pretty good spot right now in terms of the postseason. Window. George Pickens, receiver for the Steelers, is out with a hamstring injury. Don't expect a lot of passing for the Steelers as a result of Pickens' absence. Bucky Irving, running back for Tampa, questionable with back injury. He is expected to play, but you really shouldn't count on him to play today. Rashad White and Sean Tucker would split the workload if Irving sits. And then the last one for you, Sterling Shepard, receiver for Tampa. He is questionable with a foot injury. If he suits up, temper expectations for another huge week from Jalen McMillan if Sterling Shepard is back. If not, maybe McMillan is the way to go. Sunday night's game between Green Bay and Seattle. Luke Musgrave, tight end for Green Bay, out with an ankle injury. Nothing here that's not just noting that he's back at practice, but with an eye on the postseason roster. Musgrave not looking for a potential start or play today. Kenneth Walker III, doubtful with a calf injury for Seattle. Zach Charbonnet is doing just fine while Walker heals up. No need to rush him back. And that's a look at the actives and inactives for Week 15 for your fantasy football playoffs. When we come back, get a full Week 15 preview of the National Football League, as well as more of your phone calls and some voice messages. If you want to weigh in on the Padres, 833-288-0973, 833-288-0973. I'm Braden Surprenant. This is the Braden Surprenant Show, live and local each every Sunday morning from 8 to 10. San Diego's number one sports station, 97.3 The Fan. Final segment of the Braden Surprenant Show for 2024. That year flew by like that. We started doing these shows in January and February of last year, making it through the whole season. A fun Padres season it was, into the college and NFL season as well. And for the final segment of the final show, time to get you a little bit of a preview for the Week 15 NFL schedule here in 2024. And it should be a fun weekend of football starting up in about 30 minutes or so with Week 15. Let's get to NFL preview for Week 15. We had a game on Thursday, Rams and the Niners. Rams won the field goal contest 12-6. I mean, it was a sloppy game, ball flying all over the place, slipping out of everybody's hands. At our quarterbacks, not a lot of catches in that game. It was rough. Rams ended up winning 12-6. Take a look at the current look at the National Football League in terms of the standings and where everything sits right now in terms of playoff standings in the National Football League. Kansas City and Buffalo in the AFC have both clinched playoff spots. They have both clinched playoff spots. In fact, they have both clinched the division. Chiefs and Bills battling for the number 1 spot right now in the AFC. Kansas City has it by 2 games. They're 12-1 on the season. They got a 2-game lead on Buffalo, who's 10-3. Pittsburgh at 10-3 comes in at number 3 team in the AFC based on leading the AFC North, and the AFC South leader right now are the Houston Texans at number 4. Wildcard teams: Baltimore 8-5, Chargers 8-5, Denver 8-5, and the teams on the outside looking in right now: Indianapolis, Miami, and Cincinnati. And that's it. Everybody else in the AFC has been eliminated already by Week 15. Cleveland's 3-10, Jacksonville's 3-10, the Jets are 3-10, the Titans are 3-10, the Patriots are 3-10, and the Raiders are 2-11. So all those teams have already been eliminated. You're looking for 10 teams right now that are battling for 7 spots, and in reality, it's really 3 teams that are 2 games back of a playoff spot, with the Broncos having that last spot at number 7 in the AFC. When it comes to the NFC, Lions and Eagles have both clinched playoff berths. Both clinched playoff berths, still both trying to hang on and win their division. Lions currently have the 1 seed in the NFC at 12-1, lead the Eagles by 1 game in the NFC. They're at 11-2. NFC West leader right now is the Seattle Seahawks. They sit at 8-5, and the NFC South leader are the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They're at 7-6. Vikings and Packers both in a playoff spot at 11-2 and 9-4. Final playoff spot right now: Washington Commanders at 8-5. Rams are right there at 8-6, trying to get to that last spot. Falcons still alive, Cardinals still alive, Niners still alive, Saints, Cowboys, Bears, Panthers. They're all still relatively in the mix for either a wild card and some even the division in the NFC. Only 1 team has been eliminated in the National Football Conference, and that would be the New York Giants. You got your playoff bracket set. Let's get to games this week. Morning games: Kansas City at Cleveland. Kansas City's favored by 4.5 over the Cleveland Browns. Chiefs coming at 12-1. Cleveland's 3-10. Can quarterback Jameis Winston remain patient and stack methodical scoring drives against the Chiefs defense that has allowed the second fewest explosive plays in the NFL through Week 14? Well, it remains to be seen. Well, Wilson, that's something that he could be. Jameis Winston, something he could be looking for today for the Cleveland Browns. Can Jameis Winston not throw a bunch of picks? He has shined a couple of times in being the starter for the Browns. I mean, they went out and beat the Steelers in one of those 3 wins that they have gotten all year. They have been eliminated from the playoffs. Can play spoiler against Kansas City. I like the Chiefs in this game by 4.5 points. I'll take that minus 4.5. Browns wide receiver Jerry Jeudy has 50-plus receiving yards in 6 consecutive games, which is the longest of his career. He is really doing well with Jameis Winston. Jameis Winston does like to air the ball out downfield, so maybe Jerry Jeudy can have another one of those up his sleeve this afternoon, or really this morning. Bold prediction in this game: Browns quarterback Denzel Ward will surrender no more than 1 reception to receiver DeAndre Hopkins. I'm selling that. Ward is coming off a game in which he hasn't even targeted wasn't even targeted per NFL Next Gen Stats. According to ESPN, they expect the Chiefs will rely on their other playmakers and not D-Hop this afternoon. I think D-Hop gets more than one catch. I think he gets 2. I'm selling that bold prediction by ESPN. Chiefs have a 77% chance to earn the top seed in the AFC per ESPN analytics. That rises to 87% with a win and falls to 61% with a loss today against Cleveland. Here's a mid-off for you. Bengals playing for their playoff lives are down in Nashville today to take on the Titans. Bengals are 5-8, Titans are 3-10. Bengals need the Broncos and the Colts to both lose 3 games, and they need a couple of other teams to lose 2 games, if I'm not mistaken. They need the Dolphins to lose at least 2. They need the Broncos and the Colts to lose at least 3, and the Bengals are in the postseason if they go 4-0, which would be starting today against the Titans, who they have a 5-point favorite against. Joe Burrow going up against one of his most imposing foes in the Titans defensive lineman Jeffrey Simmons. Simmons had 3.5 sacks and 10 pressures in 3 career games versus the Bengals, including Cincinnati's playoff win in 2021. And Burrow had a 0.4 quarterback rating when Simmons gets for the first pressure. But Burrow is ready. Quote, "This year I'm making plays at a much higher rate than I have ever before outside of the structure." So we'll see what happens between Burrow versus Jeffrey Simmons. Again, Bengals playing for their playoff lives today. Titans lost to the Jags last Sunday, clinched their 3rd straight season with 10 or more losses. It's the first time the franchise has done that since 1983 to 1986 when the team was then the Houston Oilers. Bold prediction. I'm already taking the Bengals -5. Bold prediction, Bengals will score 40-plus points. I'm selling that. Actually, know what? No, I'm not. Bengals score a lot of points. Their offense is good. Their defense is not. They've hung tough with a lot of good teams in the National Football League. It's just hard to bet on the Bengals because they notoriously screw things up. There's a reason why they have the nickname that they have. But 40 points, I can see. Titans aren't good. Bengals' offense has been looking pretty good. I know they got in a shootout with Pittsburgh a couple of weeks ago. I'll take the Bengals scoring 40 points. I don't think the Titans are bad. I mean, they're really bad. They're not good defensively at all. They're not going to move the ball a lot on offense. I mean, it's kind of a chore for them to move the ball. It was a chore for them to move the ball against the Jags last week. I'll buy that. So I'll take Cincinnati -5. I'll buy Bengals to score 40-plus points in the game this morning. Stat to know, or what's at stake, I should say. Although the Titans have been knocked out of the playoffs, Bengals still have a 3% chance at the postseason after their Monday night win over the Cowboys. We talked about that already. Commanders and Saints. They're both, well, Saints are still in the playoffs, technically. They have a chance. Washington's favored by 7.5. Derek Carr's out, as he is in concussion protocol, and he's nursing a hand injury that could cause him to miss some time. So it's going to be Jake Haener for the Saints over rookie Spencer Rattler if Carr is ruled out, and it sounded like he was. So it's going to be Jake Haener today for the New Orleans Saints against Washington, who comes in at 8-5 and still in contention to potentially win the NFC East. Stats to know, running back Alvin Kamara, 62 rushing yards from reaching the first 1,000-yard rushing season of his career. I think he's going to get that easily in this game. They have ran him to death this season. I'd like to see Kendre Miller get a little bit more carries to kind of just spell Alvin Kamara. Again, Saints still relatively in playoff consideration, but Alvin Kamara, 62 yards today, book it. I mean, he's going to get 1,000 yards rushing on the season. Bold prediction, someone will return a kickoff for a touchdown. I'm selling that. Commanders and Saints ranked last and second to last in terms of most kick return yards allowed over expectation at 287 and 147, respectively, per NFL Next Gen Stats. That's great. I don't see that happening. I'll take Washington by 7.5. I think they cover against New Orleans. New Orleans is not very good, and they got a rookie quarterback in Jake Haener. Moving on, Ravens at Giants. Baltimore Ravens 8-5. Giants are 2-11. Giants have been eliminated from playoff contention. They're the only team in the NFC that has been eliminated from playoff contention. Baltimore is favored by 16 points. 16 points. That's a lot. 16-point favorite for the Baltimore Ravens in an NFL game. This has the makings of a huge day for running back Derrick Henry and the Ravens' rushing attack. Giants are giving up 4.9 yards per carry this season, which is tied for the franchise record's second worst performance over the past 2 decades. Baltimore is averaging 5.72 yards per rushing attempt, which is the second best in NFL history behind the 1963 Browns. Derrick Henry, big day. I don't know if Baltimore covers 16 points. I know they're down to, God, who are they down to? I know Tommy DeVito's back to starting for the Giants. They'll try their best to move the ball downfield. No Drew Lock. Daniel Jones moved on. I'll take. I think the Ravens win head to head. I'll take the Giants plus 16. Ravens quarterback Lamar Jackson has 29 passing touchdowns this season, which is the second most in the NFL behind Joe Burrow's 33, and already his most since having 36 in his unanimous MVP season in 2019. Stat to know. I think he's going to light that up even more today. Bold prediction, as put out by ESPN, Giants running back Tyrone Tracy Jr. will record fewer than 30 rushing yards. Sure, I'll take that. Ravens have the highest-ranked rushing defense in terms of EPA per play, and there's a pretty good chance the Giants will fall behind early and start throwing downfield. Yeah, I'll buy that. 100%. I'll buy that. What's at stake for the Ravens? They're still in the hunt for the AFC North crown, holding a 20% chance to win the division compared to the Steelers' 80% chance. Their odds improved to 23% with the win and fall to 6% with the loss. They need to win to keep pace with Pittsburgh, who they will welcome to Baltimore next week. Cowboys at Panthers. Cowboys still alive. Carolina is somehow too. Carolina's a 3-point favorite at home against Dallas. Last week's loss to Cincinnati left the Cowboys as down as they have been all season. So how do the players respond in a short week against the Panthers, who have played better as of late? Well, we'll see. Players have continued to battle under coach Mike McCarthy, but this will be his biggest challenge to date, with leaders such as Dak Prescott with a hamstring injury being out, Zach Martin with an ankle injury out for the season. Both of those players, 2-game winning streak, had the Cowboys dreaming of a playoff run at 5-8. They're not out of the chase yet, but the loss to the Panthers would mean their first sub-500 finish since 2020. Cowboys and Panthers have 2 of the worst rushing defenses in the NFL. Carolina ranks last in rushing yards allowed per game. Cowboys are 30th, which is like third to last. Bold prediction, Panthers edge. DJ Wonnum will record a sack. I'll buy that. Cowboys are down bad right now with their quarterback situation, with everything, with all the injuries. Not playing really good football either. What's at stake? Panthers hold a 10.5% chance to get the number 1 pick in the NFL draft in 2025. Third highest odds per ESPN's FPI, behind those of the Giants at 41%, the Patriots at 24%. Their chances increased to 19.1% with a loss. Most of these, like, what's at stake are like how to get in the playoffs. And for the Panthers, it's like, how do you get back to getting the number 1 pick? How do you get back to getting the number 1 pick? I think the Cowboys put up a better fight. I'll take the Cowboys plus 4. Other morning games, Jets at Jags. Oh, mid. Both these teams have been eliminated. Do you really care? Jets are favored by 3.5 in this game. Jags defense ranks last in yards allowed per game. That's on pace to be Jacksonville's second highest yards per game allowed through a season in franchise history. Bold prediction, wide receiver Brian Thomas Jr. will record 100-plus receiving yards. He has gotten double-digit targets in each past 2 games, which is what Jacksonville needs to do. And even if Sauce Gardner plays, he's not playing well this season, and he does have a hamstring injury. So look for Brian Thomas Jr. to have a big day. I'll buy that because I got him in fantasy. Could really use that. What's at stake? Jags and Jets have both been eliminated from the playoff race, and both could be picking in the top 5 of the draft. They have a 54.1% and 36.1% odds, respectively, at a top 5 selection. That's all you need to know about that game. Dolphins at Texans. Still alive. Both of these teams. Dolphins trying to sneak into the playoffs. They're a couple of games behind Denver. Houston trying to maintain that lead in the AFC South. Keep an eye on the turnover battle. In this one, Tua Tagovailoa has completed 70% or more of his passes in 7 straight games, which is the longest streak in Dolphins history, and tied for the second longest in the season. Only Joe Montana has a longer streak since this was first tracked in 1933. Texans are favored by 3 in this game. I like Houston in this game by 3. Buy or sell, bold prediction. Texans tight end Dalton Schultz will score a touchdown in his second consecutive game. Of targets against the Dolphins, 24% go to tight ends, which is more than any other NFL team. I'll buy that. I think Dalton Schultz will score a touchdown today. I'll buy that. Anytime touchdown. Book it. Dalton Schultz. Dolphins, Texans. Afternoon slate starting at 125. Colts at Broncos. Colts at Broncos is an interesting matchup. Broncos trying to stay in that number 7 spot in the playoffs. Colts trying to battle their way into a playoff spot. Bengals need both these teams to lose. That's not going to happen. Denver is favored by 4 in the Mile High City. Sunday's game is massive for Indianapolis because the Broncos are their primary challenger for the final AFC wildcard spot, but the Colts haven't faced well in pivotal late-season games in recent years. A couple notable failures include last season's Week 18 loss to the Texans that determined the winner of the AFC South, and in 2021, with the Colts poised to clinch a playoff spot easily, they shockingly lost to the Raiders and Jags in Week 17 and 18, respectively, knocking Indianapolis out of the postseason. They could really use a win today in Denver. Colts have the second easiest remaining schedule of any team in the NFL. Only the Falcons have an easier finishing slate. A win today would make things a lot easier for Indianapolis in terms of a playoff push. Really put the Denver Broncos in a win-or-go-home game or a pivotal matchup next Thursday against the Chargers. What's at stake? Broncos' chances at the playoffs increased to 92% with a win and decreased to 50% with a loss per ESPN Analytics. Colts' odds at the postseason climbed to 53% with a win and fall to 6% with a loss. This is almost a playoff game between the Colts and the Broncos coming up at 125. Bold prediction, Latu will record a sack. Buy or sell, I'll buy it for the Colts till he gets a sack. Latu is improving a little bit each game with 2 sacks and a 22% pass rush win rate at edge, 8th highest since Week 10. That is a playoff level game in Denver. This is a Super Bowl level game in Detroit. Bills at Lions, 125 on CBS. Detroit's favored by 2.5 in this game. Bills have scored 30-plus points in 7 straight games, which is the longest streak in franchise history and one shy of the longest in NFL history. Bills lost last week to the Rams. I think they bounced back. I like the Bills plus 2.5 in this one against the Detroit Lions. Buy or sell, bold prediction, the Lions will block a punt. I'm selling that. Bills are allowing a 14% pressure rate on punts this season per NFL Next Gen Stats, second highest rate in the league, only behind the 49ers. Even though it might be susceptible to one, I don't think they do that. I will sell that, but I will take the Bills plus 2.5. Steelers and Eagles, another great game. Super Bowl type matchup. Battle for Pennsylvania. Philadelphia is favored by 5.5. Steelers have lost 10 consecutive road games versus the Eagles, dating to 1965. That is time for the longest road losing streak against a single opponent in franchise history. Bold prediction, A.J. Brown will receive at least 4 fourth-quarter targets. I'll buy that. In an effort to squash the potential strife over Philadelphia's passing game, don't be surprised if the Eagles try to force the ball to Brown early. I like the Eagles in this game. I don't know if they cover 5.5. I'll take them outright. I like the Steelers plus 5.5. I'll buy the A.J. Brown getting targets late in this contest. Patriots and Cardinals, another afternoon contest for you. Patriots already eliminated from the playoffs. Cardinals trying to keep pace. Cardinals are favored by 6. Stat to know, Cardinals have lost 3 games in a row after a 4-game winning streak. During that span, their 15.3 points per game ranks 29th in the league. Really slowed down Kyler Murray and company. I like the Cardinals in this one. Bucks at Chargers up in Los Angeles. Chargers are favored by 3 in this game. Bucks are riding a 3-game win streak after losing 4 straight from Week 7 to Week 10. They've rushed for over at least 150 yards in all 3 games, which is tied for the longest streak in franchise history. Buccaneers hold a 1-game lead over the Falcons in the NFC South. Their chance to win the division title increases to 87% with the win and falls to 63% with a loss. Another playoff-type game between the Chargers and the Bucks. Night game tonight, Packers at Seahawks, should be a good one on NBC. That game will be right here on 97.3 The Fan. That'll do it for me for 2024. Braden Surprenant wrapping up 1 year of the Braden Surprenant Show. We'll see you in the new year as we continue coverage this week on 97.3 The Fan, San Diego's #1 sports station.